So we're talking about the stock market, how it has nothing to do with mental acuity. I'm sorry,
Well,
did I miss here?
in the short run, all stocks are memes. They're all memes. Yeah.
Well, it's emotions play a role in picking a stock, and
Yeah.
I wonder what an EEG looks like in the trading room floor of somebody if humans actually make decisions anymore. Is it all automated, you think? But back in the day, like in the 80s, 90s, you didn't have that stuff. You had people on the floor, signals and making calls. And I wonder what's going through somebody's EEG when they're, their fear of missing out. They see their friends making money. And by that time, the market's too hot. Then they get in and then they lose money. What do you think is going on mentally, Joshua?
Yeah, the fear of missing out is dangerous, and there's a steep learning curve for anybody who's starting anything. So the first time you're jumping into something that you're not a veteran at, you're going to fall into pretty much all the usual mistakes. And to a degree, some markets exist and survive because there's that constant feeding of the market by the novices that haven't figured it out yet. And to your question, I do think that there's a strong degree of automation, and that stuff's been around for 20 years. It's not new. The automation stuff's been around a long time, and it just grows and grows and grows and takes over more of the market. But you have kind of these newbies coming in, having the fear of missing out, jumping in, feeding the machine with their money in a way that sacrifices them a little bit. And people who are doing this automating, which is almost a skimming process, doing, probably relatively well. Again, that doesn't, I know how to do that stuff. It doesn't grab me though. It's not fun. I don't get excited about it, so I don't do it. So I've done very, very little of it. And it usually has to be attached to something political for me to be excited and care.
Automating what, or what are we talking about?
Like automated stock tradings. It just doesn't grab me. I know how to do it.
Mindset.
Yeah. But people really do pay for their education generally through money in those fields, unfortunately, which is, I think, to a degree what feeds the degree. Like if there was no new people and it was all veteran people, I think some of these systems would slow down because they're fed by people's mistakes, which I don't like. And that's part of the reason why I don't like playing the game. So,
well, there's also paper trading or fantasy stock market where you don't have real money, but you can compete with others. Maybe we should do that, Joshua.
Yeah, I've been doing that on my own with paper. I probably should just do it digitally. There's no reason why I can't have like a fantasy account. I'm sure I haven't thought about actually doing it on some sort of account. I should, but I literally
the Neuro-Noodle Fantasy Stock Market Challenge. Okay, what do we all start with, Doc?
What do we all start with?
Yeah, Josh? What do we start with? How much money? $1,000, 100,000?
I don't know what the rules are, but when I was a kid,
we are the rules.
Can we have a disclaimer about this is not stock advice or something like that?
No, yeah, I know.
Do the opposite of what we do.
And they told you to start with 500.
Okay, $500. All right.
Yeah.
I'll whip that up tomorrow and send it out to everybody. See what happens.
I do like Pete's advice of do a fantasy thing, because then you're not actually going to lose anything. And we were talking about this before we went live about 2.5 years ago. I wanted to know how accurate my beliefs were about the economy and about politics. And so I decided to actually take some money and play with it on the stock market on things that were political as an attempt to see if my perception was correct, because perception distorts what you see in reality, but also distorts how you think things played out, because you'll minimize your losses and you'll maximize your gains, and you'll distort how you think things played out. Even people do this all the time. So I thought money will be objective because it will just be gone, And so it was a fun experiment, and it did very well. I didn't have a lot of money to start with, but I don't have as little money anymore. I have much more money than I used to 2.5 years ago. So,
what were you noting? We did a show last. Anthony, I don't know if you saw last week. We did a show, me, Dr. Marie, and Jay Gunkelman on politics. That was something.
Yeah, I did. It was fireworks.
Yeah, but Joshua, speaking of politics, how has that come into play in your experience with trading stocks? So what were you telling me?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about how the human brain actually has a blind spot. And we have different names for it in different circles. Like you use the word fear of missing out, FOMO. In the counseling circles, which is like half of what I reside in, we actually talk to our clients a lot about how they're missing or they have a bias or blind spot against over-evaluating the risks of their behaviors and under-evaluating the risks of the absence of behaviors. Meaning like they over-evaluate choices and they under-evaluate the costs of not making choices. And people are disproportionately more likely to stall and pay a huge cost for stalling than they are to take some risks, make mistakes, learn and grow. And that's a big problem and a common theme in mental health. So it's interesting. So
Yeah.
Pete was talking about how AI can fill that gap, and I was kind of challenged by that. I was like, "Oh, that's a good point." That's
How would you do that?
I mean, I see articles about Gen Z using ChatGPT to invest and things like this.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think Wealthfront touts itself as a AI money manager.
Yeah.
But I don't know. You really want to
Yes.
find out what the truth is.
I think it goes more in line with the article that you just
I mean?
posted of it's great for educational purposes. You posted an article about how it can help people who struggle with conspiracy theories be more grounded and bring them back down to earth. I thought it was a good article. And I think it's same in line with that kind of thing. It can bring people back down to earth who are really far off base.
I can
Jay,
see
we're talking about Joshua's stock market trading and what he's learned.
Well, I'm not one to give stock trading advice.
There you go.
But
I'm a newbie. I'm just playing, having fun. I'm not trying to advise either.
I did hear advice given: don't try to catch a falling knife.
Yeah.
So, but that's just general advice.
Yeah.
So, but I thought you were going to be talking about something colorful.
Okay.
What's that?
Well, methylene blue. You sent a link out about
I sent a link to the video. Yeah. Jay, what am I talking about?
I'm
like Jay
drinking
has a
something
mouthful.
purple, but it's like blueberries and stuff. I mean, Renita makes this stuff for me. She went to APB for 3 days to hang out with her friends that she's met over the years. I can't go, but she's got friends, so she's there. But she made me a whole stack of these purple drinks, but it primarily blueberries and things like that. It's not methylene blue, I'll say that. But then it's a useful drug for urinary tract pain. If you've got urinary tract pain, it's perfectly good for that. And if you've got cyanide poisoning, it's a useful treatment for that. And the thing is, more commonly what you run into is that people who use poppers, drug use with poppers, mess up their hemoglobin. And methylene blue is used to treat that to effectively. But I don't know how many people are using poppers to the extent that they're screwing up their blood supply.
Yeah, how does that dye mess up your EEG, Jay? Is that now? I looked at the headline and I sent it to you guys, but
yeah, until I see some data myself, there are influencers who talk about EEG, and I'm afraid that there's a lot of talk and not nearly enough knowledge behind it. Unfortunately, the EEG and methylene blue is something that needs to be looked at, but I haven't seen any data on it.
Yeah, I just looked it up and it says it's anticonvulsant, and that anti-epileptic, neuroprotective. It acts on GABA, and it's an antioxidant. Something here about mitochondrial function. But yeah, it sounds like we need to test it.
That sounds really surprising. Okay.
There are a lot of things that are anticonvulsant, but not necessarily healthy for you either.
Sure.
Oh,
And-
for sure. Yeah.
And I see that its prior use as a medicine has been advised against here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Although it is listed on one of the essential drugs of history as a drug, it's just that in all my years I've never seen anybody run into the use of it. But then in San Francisco, with a gay population overusing poppers, this sort of thing has some case application there. But that's that's a unique circumstance. It's not necessarily a common occurrence to overdose on poppers. So,
Like jalapeno poppers?
no, the stimulating drug used as a sexual stimulant.
Okay.
So,
Do you
and
need a
goodness knows,
prescription?
just mentioning something was a sexual stimulant, probably the market for
Well-
it just went way up.
Well, poppers
just
are
as a-
muscle relaxants, correct? So that would mean, and that,
Yeah.
so GABA can, I think, because there's a Flexeril acts on GABA, and it is also a muscle relaxant.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Flexeril. It's
Oh no, I'm not recommending
GABA.
anything, to be
It's-
clear.
it's
I was
not-
just trying to
not
understand
a-
what the drug is doing. Yeah.
And that's a GABA B, not a GABA A.
Yeah.
So it's supposedly got less of a high. Although if you've ever had Flexeril, you do end up with a bit of a buzz from taking it. So,
That's interesting.
but it's a GABA B related drug, not GABA A.
Actually,
and-
Jay, I have a friend who uses Flexeril for their condition. They're an MD, but they have Ehlers-Danlos, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they think it's a genetic inability to produce collagen, and it produces all kinds of effects from chronic pain to muscle weakness to balance, even cardiovascular issues.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I was looking at the EEG of it, and they say high delta, widespread delta in the brain. Now, unfortunately, he tried neurofeedback. It doesn't seem to, it's had other benefits, but getting rid of that delta has been hard. And I know it's crazy, maybe even to think that you could help something that's hard to treat, but didn't know if you had any thoughts on that disease or anything around it.
First of all, if somebody says they have delta in the EEG, I would like to see it, because there's more artifact interpreted as delta than there is delta sometimes. So,
And to be clear, this was a paper, but yes, go on. Sorry.
yeah, but assuming that there is delta in the EEG, that's sizable, is either an increase in the slow cortical potential dynamics, which doesn't go along with the syndrome, or it's actually a decrease in white matter innervation of the cortex, and that doesn't make much sense as a finding either.
What they said was to link it back to methylene blue. The paper says that people with mitochondrial disorders and Ehlers-Danlos patients have this elevated delta. This is what I read. And I know that in just reading about this methylene blue here, it says methylene blue seems to act on mitochondria in some fashion. So I'm almost wondering, is methylene blue something they should be studying for potentially for this Ehlers-Danlos and mitochondrial disorder? Go on, sorry.
If you're a researcher researching that area, you probably have more than enough things to already study.
Okay.
But it's probably something that's been looked at. So it's not something that's a known EEG correlate, and I again, on a case basis, like to look to see what's actually there. There's delta that's in absolute power, and then there's delta that's in relative power. Relative power delta can end up being high because of a lower voltage, slower EEG, which is toxic and metabolic, and that's a possibility. Metabolic would go along with mitochondrial problems.
Jay, question. We were talking about sleep, and I heard GABA, and couple people in my family had sleep problems, and for some reason the doctor said try gabapentin. Why would that help with sleep?
Ooh,
First of all,
that's not
gabapentin
the
has
first
nothing to do
line.
with GABA. It's very good
Yeah.
marketing. It's extremely good marketing. So is pregabalin. Pregabalin, is that a precursor to getting GABA? No.
Okay.
Both of those are just very, very clever naming conventions on a drug company. Those are both primarily anticonvulsants. However, they've gained use outside of the anticonvulsant application area.
Yeah.
Peripheral neuropathies are a very common use of Neurontin, gabapentin, but
Nerve pain, you mean?
yeah, which is peripheral neuropathy is nerve pain. The burning feet, the tingly needles and pins in the feet, sort of a sensation.
From diabetes most of the time, correct?
Quite often diabetes, but also it's a peripheral neuropathy in alcoholism as well. So and if you want to get really bad peripheral neuropathies, be a huffer.
Nitrous oxide or
spray a solvent into a bag and breathe it. You know, the kids that creates randomized snippets of your white matter to disappear. It's a solvent, you know, and if you actually study it, if you stimulate the foot, you can trace the nerve all the way up to the spot where the foot arrives in a sensory area, and you can, you know, the nerve conduction velocity, if you measure at the knee and then further up and at the base of the spine, upper spine, then up on the cortex, if you have progressively worsening delays, it's not one segment, there's little bits of problem all the way along the line. And that random snipping of the white matter is some of the worst multifocal delta that you can run into in the EEG.
But why would the MDs tell them to take it for sleep?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Gabapentin for sleep takes away minor pain. It strips away excitatory neurochemistry, including glutamate, which is why it's an anticonvulsant.
But
it's not a primary anticonvulsant. It's an add-on anticonvulsant. If you're already on an anticonvulsant and it's not quite stabilizing everything, this takes away some of the excitatory nature of the cortex, and that may help the anticonvulsant gain control. That said, if you take one anticonvulsant, you get like 35-40% of the population have a positive outcome. If you take a second anticonvulsant added on, you get another 17%. But if you take a third, it actually decreases the success rate. So and the epileptologists in their realm basically say you can't give more than 3 anticonvulsants. If you're using 3 and you want to try a different one, you have to take one away and add another one. You can't just keep adding them up. I have seen patients come to our office on 5 and 6 anticonvulsants. But it's an act of desperation by a doctor who doesn't really understand what they're doing, and it's, in fact, it's quite often worsens things. If you get somebody groggy or kind of goofy, sluggish and under aroused, that not awake, not asleep state is a transitional state, and it brings out transience. What do you think EEG discharges are? Transients. You know? So if you get drugged up on too many anticonvulsants and it drops your arousal level, the likelihood of triggering discharges is enhanced as well. So again, any more than 3 is a mistake. And again, the epileptologist will tell you it's a mistake. It's one that I've seen made far too often, unfortunately.
So Jay, what I was just going to say is gabapentin is known for discontinuation syndromes. In other words, when you try to stop taking it, you get a problem. And that's true for a lot of anything that works on GABA, which I know this is a calcium channel blocker. But
yeah, it's not just a calcium channel blocker, but it works on balances glutamate and excitatory neurochemistry. But if you're suppressing the nervous system for a period of time and you stop suppressing it, you get a rebound hyperexcitability, and that's the case in anticonvulsants in a really kind of a bad way.
But the other problem with this is
hyper arousal of the cortex. And
what I've heard from a neurologist is like the nervous system does not want to be depressed chronically. But also the main thing that alarms me, the reason why I got kind of triggered by this is by no means first line, second line, third line of treatment for insomnia or for sleep issues. This is like down the line. It's like taking a sledgehammer to something that needs a ball peen. And I have been meeting people who are somehow they're finding out of the ether these doctors who will give them whatever. So for instance, I know 2 women who are taking testosterone for energy. And that is by no means studied in women for energy. And I'll tell you this, their energy was low because they both are chronically sleep deprived. And so the doctor is not treating, that is like nowhere studied for sleep sufficiently. So that's why I'm getting a little worked up. I'm meeting more people on these unorthodox medications when there's 5 other things that they could have tried, including neurofeedback, that are going to be much more studied and much safer. And they just jump to the shotgun. But go on. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Well, neurofeedback is way down the line for everything.
Yes,
as a field, we have to be cooperative with each other because in a business model, we're not really competing. If the world knew who we were and what we did and how to get a hold of us, we would be competing. But they don't know who we are, how to get a hold of us, or what we do. So how do they get a hold of us? And it's usually way down the line after other things have failed. And occasionally, because of a case that they've heard about, they may end up stumbling into it earlier than maybe it was historically.
We got to order up from the kitchen.
Radar Ash would ask, probably Jay, but anyone, what do anticonvulsants like Lamictal do? Do they lower arousal?
Well, Lamictal is a glutamate modulator, which does change the excitability of the cortex, and it's a stabilizing agent. If you're a neurologist or an epileptologist, it's an anticonvulsant. If you're a psychiatrist, it's a stabilizing agent, or sometimes they'll refer to it as an atypical antipsychotic even, because 1/3 of all the psychosis is actually epileptiform discharges, not the pattern that you would see in psychosis other than epileptiform content. So.
One thing on sleep, since it came up right before we came on this podcast, I kind of got some good news. I was on a little bit of a neurofeedback high here. My mom called me. She has begun neurofeedback recently, and she called me to tell me, Anthony, I am sleeping. I'm doing it for her, but she said, Anthony, I am sleeping so well. This is the first time in forever that I have not even had to get up to pee. And the crazy thing about it was that is not something I told her to anticipate as an effective treatment. That's just what's happening. So it was super, because let me tell you, she was one of, do I have to do this? Come on. I don't need this, right? And she tried it, and she's getting, it's been progressive, but today was really the one that she's like, wow, something has changed. So just wanted to share that, guys.
Now,
are her kidneys okay?
Congratulations to her for learning how to control her own brain well by herself.
Right?
That. And goodness knows how she may have found out about this stuff,
Right. Yeah. It only took a few years.
The waking up to pee is really not waking up to pee. You wake up and I could get up and go pee. It's very seldom the necessity to wake up to go pee is, you're about to bust a bladder or something. People that have wakefulness use the wakeful time to go use the bathroom, but it isn't it isn't like there was a necessity as a convenience,
That's what I'm saying. I think that's what it's like. It wasn't a urgency, but since she wasn't sleeping deeply, it's like might as well is what the sense I was getting. But in any case, she described the sleep as really deep, like she emphasized. So, and the other thing was, Jay, I'll just mention, this came from frontal training. It came from when this hit was frontal broadband suppression. So I thought that was intriguing because I know that one is known. I think I've heard you say that can be stimulating, but I recently
it can
heard
be
that in some
gently
patients
stimulating, but that can be stabilizing for sleep as well.
Stabilizing, okay.
There's two basic insomnia drivers. One is CZ beta spindles. The other one is an anterior cingulate. The anterior cingulate can drive OCD. And if you go to bed and you lay down there and your brain locks onto something and you ruminate, shut the hell up! I can't count that many sheep. But your OCD will keep you awake.
Yeah,
you'll lock onto something, and that's got to be dealt with at the frontal midline.
That's perfect. He is a busy mind sort of person. I don't know the repetitive behavior per se, but very much getting things done. And I
gotta tell your mom you're talking about her on.
I think she mom. Yeah, I was just so excited. I probably could have thought a little more about that.
It's a good thing, and she's to be congratulated for grabbing the reins of control. So many people think they're a puppet, and they've got strings, and they've got to have somebody pull the right string.
Right. You know what, Jay? Recently, there was a study that came out since we're talking about sleep. I can get it for you. It's like a week ago, but essentially, it said that when somebody in dementia, they find that lack of deep sleep increases and as we know, it increases the amyloid beta buildup of plaque, but it said it specifically is doing it at the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. And the novel part of this study was the position, but also they said, and when the plaque builds up there, the spindle density is reduced, so they're not getting the sleep spindles, and then the plaque builds up further, so it becomes reinforcing process. And so I'm wondering, we were doing that frontal region on her.
As Barry said, SMR comes from the ventral basal nucleus of the thalamus.
Okay. So is that near the VL, PFC or whatever?
It's part of the sleep regulatory mechanism. SMR is your sleep spindle, the same generator, the same frequencies and all that. And it's developed, unlike alpha that matures up the speed. By the time you're in your young teens, your alpha kind of comes up into the alpha band stably. 7, 8 years old, you should be in the alpha band, but some kids are a little slower. But SMR is tuned when you're a year and a half old already to its adult tuning. You're good at sleeping when you're young. You spend more time doing that than anything else at that young age. And that mechanism is already well developed. Now, the sleep spindle is what allows you to descend into slow wave sleep. Its effect is done after a vertex sharp wave, which is the response to a sound. That the K complex in sleep medicine, K for knock, and the sound evokes a vertex sharp wave, which is the auditory P100, the arrival of the sound cortically. Now, that may not be the auditory cortex, but the auditory cortex is enfolded into the temporal parietal junction, and they point up. They're measured up at the top of your head. And so you see a vertex sharp wave. If there's not a good sleep spindle, you don't descend into slow wave sleep. You wake back up. So you go stage 1, you bump into stage 2, and you come back awake instead of stage 2 to descend to stage 3. So the sleep spindle, which is SMR, is essential for that stable descent. And you lose slow wave sleep if you don't end up having the stability that SMR gives you. And slow wave sleep is how you end up with the kind of the cleanup of metabolic waste. And if you don't have slow wave sleep, apparently if it's specifically degrading the sleep spindle, I can see that as a downward spiral. Not a spindle, a spiral. It's a different thing than a spindle,
Order up.
Yeah. So Radar asks, thank you, Jay. I really appreciate that. So Radar asks, bipolar protocol rewards make two sites more dissimilar and inhibits make those two sites more similar, right? If that's the case, what's happening with ILF and ISF?
You're going to have to speak to the ISF and ILF folks about what they do.
Okay.
I can handle it if needed.
And you should.
Okay, so they are still referencing, Mark Smith's ISF is still referencing the ears, and each channel is referencing the earlobes or the mastoid. And so we're still dealing with raw data signal in that case. With the Othmer method or ILF, you are still referencing the top of the head in the HD ILF, which has been around for like 10 years. That's the more current modality is a bipolar reference or sequential, in that we are referencing CZ to your other reference point, wherever that training is going to be. But your reference is always going to be CZ. There's not everything published on ILF. We don't understand everything that it's doing like we do ISF. We know that they're more similar than they are different in ways, except for the frequency ranges are far, far, far apart. But yeah, again,
And
Mark Smith is more
as Dirk has shown with the proofs that have been done for the training have been done with Dirk's lab, and
yes,
Dirk has shown that the infralow or infraslow, whichever way you want to call it, very, very low frequencies below half a hertz end up basically being what they're talking about, and that very slow content as a level, if it shifts electronegative, the cortex is busy and it makes more fast activity, the rhythmic activity of the EEG. If it goes electropositive, all that high frequency activity goes away. Electropositive shift can turn off seizures. That's the basis of the slow cortical potential work, which was also very low frequency. It had a broader range because the baseline of the EEG can rise and fall. It's still just a level. It's not a rhythm. It's a level, and that can be trained up and down. A normal person can gain control over the slow cortical potential and the motor strip area in 4 hours of training, which is 8 half-hour sessions. But an epileptic, on the other hand, takes about 40 hours of training, because they have a problem controlling that system. So, but clinical folks normally take longer than normal folks. If you look at Jim Hart's learning curve on the learning curve of alpha, a fifth order learning curve, his 1974 dissertation. This initial habituation, active volition where it actually decreases the alpha, then passive volition where it goes back up, and then exponential increase when you learn control of alpha. A normal person can learn that control within a few hours of continuous training. Jim was an experimental subject in Kamiya's lab, and they put him in the soundproof chamber and turned on the alpha training, and everybody in the lab went to lunch. They forgot he was there. And they came back a few hours later. They were notorious for their leisurely lunch breaks. And out of the chamber floated Jim. The basis of his dissertation was the learning curve in his data. And again, 3 hours for a normal person. We used the same curve fitting approach to the data we were seeing for alpha training at the state hospital. A clinical patient takes about 14, 15 hours of training. It's not a few hours, it extends the training time. The curve is the same. The learning curve shape is the same. It's just extended in time. The severity makes it, it takes longer to learn.
Order up.
Radar had a couple questions. The first is, he said, is training reference to the mastoid roughly the same as training reference to the ear? And then there was an ISF question for Josh. Do the sites become less similar, like with a reward? So there you go.
We know a lot more about ISF, in my opinion, and we tend to see a more balanced expression of the triple network theory. And so I would say, in a way, they become more varied, which from a certain lens, they become more varied, and that's considered positive from that lens.
Okay.
Enhanced variability is typically a resilience positive for a system. So
Interesting.
Kurtosis, a tall, skinny distribution, may look cute, but under any stress, that system shatters. There's no resilience. There's no flexibility within the system. A good system will take strain and stress with speed up and slow down. But if you have a tall, skinny distribution of alpha at 10, everybody thinks, oh, great, 10 hertz alpha. But if it's leptokurtotic, too tall a kurtosis, a little bit of stress or strain and the whole system quits. So there's no resilience to it. Just like heart rate variability, variability is resilience. And when your heart rate has lost its variability, good freaking luck. That predicts a heart attack. A too regular without any variability in your heart rate, that's a failure mode. So
almost every single week, I do a consult for somebody who's worried about their post-ISF or post-ILF results with a pre-post QEG because they can't interpret the changes because they are not looking at the raw data and they just have Z-score maps and they don't understand the changes because they can't read the raw data. And so if you're going to do pre-post maps on ISF or ILF, I would say that you have to be able to read raw data, which I would think would be desirable regardless. But I would also prefer that they understand the triple network theory because you just won't understand what the improvements are.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Dirk does a very nice job with the triple network stuff. As a shameless plug for the Sassoon Summit, a couple of years ago, Dirk did a big, long, very detailed keynote, and so did Martijn Arns. And those are now $50 a pop for those on the website. So if you're interested in learning about not just the triple network, but there's a fourth one, default mode resting state, then salience, and then central executive. But there's also a limbic, emotion and memory that taps in as a fourth network as well. So anyway, Dirk's talk is, I think, I'm strongly biased towards his material because I've assisted getting some of it published. In 2005, basically when we met, he showed me a paper on out-of-body experience and the functional MRI identification of the out-of-body experience, and who the hell does that kind of experiments? Dirk stuck an implant into a guy's temporal lobe for tinnitus, and the little tiny stimulators have a whole bunch of electrodes on them, and once you've got it in there and you've got everything tidied up, then you have to pick which pair of electrodes you're going to use to stimulate. And when they turned on one pair, the guy had an out-of-body experience. Now, in the U.S., the risk management people would have cut the wires. You couldn't have stimulated those two ever again, But this is Dirk, and he said, well, he can't feel the stimulation. All he can say is if he's in or out. So we have a blinded rater out-of-body experience study to do, and they threw him in the scanner and stimmed him, and when you turn off the stimulator, he would stay out for about 20 seconds or so they had time to do a functional MRI scan. Anyway, he asked what's wrong with the paper, and I said, well, this is great science, nothing wrong with the paper. And he said, well, New England Journal of Medicine sent it back to me twice with no comments. I said, oh, well, I could tell you're European when I read it, because of the syntax, just the sentence structure. And the New England Journal of Medicine, you almost have to have a Boston accent to get in there. So, you let me rewrite it. So the syntax is Bostonian, and we'll send it back in. They published it with no editorial changes, November 2007. So I've seen Dirk's papers on and off since then when he wants to have somebody take a quick look at it, and his work is always impeccable. And who has gigantic databases like that. But he's an academic neurosurgeon, and he invents neurosurgeries. He was the first one to do an implant for tinnitus, and he had to go through an IRB, and the IRB doesn't approve experimental brain surgery lightly. The person is essentially virtually suicidally complaining of the tinnitus, and this is a heroic effort to try and stop it. And here's the model that says it might work. And with a TMS pulse just outside the temporal area, you can turn the tinnitus off for a couple of seconds, so this will probably work. And they approved it. Into his office marches the head of the hospital and the head of ENT. And the ENT people are saying, tinnitus is ours. This is a turf war. You can't do neurosurgery for an ear, nose, and throat thing. This is the tinnitus is ours. And the hospital administrator kind of said, well, you can't. I'm scheduled for 10 in the morning for surgery. And the IRB approved it, the patients already, and we, so 10 o'clock in the morning we were ready to go, and they said, no, you've got to cancel that. And so Dirk did cancel it. He moved it to 8 a.m. And did it. And at 10 o'clock, as they were closing up, into the gallery up above comes the hospital administrator to make sure that they didn't show up, but they were finishing. So later, Dirk's in his office, and in comes the hospital administrator and the head of ENT again, and they're all irate. We told you not to do it. And Dirk says, the patient's tinnitus is gone. And the ENT guy goes, I know, I can't believe it. But you can't tell anybody who ever did this. This is, oh, geez. The newspaper interview, it's going to be in the newspaper today. And they said, oh, this can't be it. And he argued with them for a little while, but he knows the presses run at noon. And so he said, okay, I'll call him and tell him. So, but so it went into the press, and internationally it became a well-known, although still rare. I mean, if you've got tinnitus, this is not your first thing, your hearing aids to put back in the hearing that you've lost. That's usually a thalamocortical dysrhythmia. So putting the input back in from the input instead of putting on an external artificial input to that cortical area to turn off the tinnitus.
Jay, since we're in a lull for questions, that means it's my turn. You brought up out of body experience, and I'm trying to put that up against, you've told stories how you brought people out of a coma. Like, what's going on in the brain when you're having that experience, and what's going on when you bring somebody out of a coma? I know it's not a pleasant thing, but do you look at them the same way, or are they separate?
We got $6.8 million from the federal government to bring people out of a coma in an experiment. And they gave us 33 soldiers, all in a coma over a year if they were from trauma, or over 3 months if they were from anoxia. And at those points in time after you go into a coma, if you have had no response at all for that amount of time, they basically say you have less than 10% chance of recovery, meaning like good freaking luck recovering. There's no expectation of recovery at that point. So that's when they gave them to us. But if there was some other hope, why would they have given them to these people to do an experiment? I mean, if there was a treatment that was available, they would have been receiving it. But they were in a coma for over a year, so what the heck? There's only one hospital in the U.S. that would basically allow this, and that's in New Jersey. Nothing to say about the ethics in New Jersey, but hey, you want to, but we got the money because I predicted accurately when people had come out of a coma. There was a data set with a series of 10 to 12 EEGs that had been recorded. Somewhere in the series of EEGs, they came out of their coma. And they had given this puzzle, tell me blinded rater, when they came out of the coma. And they gave that puzzle to pretty much everybody that you could imagine naming and that did anything in EEG. And nobody really, anybody in QEG, and nobody could predict which one was suddenly conscious. And the guy that runs that whole project heard me give a talk on consciousness. So he asks me, Jay, would you like to look at this data? This is the only silly question I ever get, and I said, sure, send me the data. So I get this big packet. It's a stack of QEGs and no EEGs. And I said, well, you're asking me to take step 2 without step 1. And I know I'm going to step in it if I take step 2 without taking step 1. So send me the EEGs, the raw EEG files. And if you've seen enough EEG, as you're scrolling through the raw EEG, there's a dance. There's rhythmic shifts of activity. That's a live EEG brain doing what it does. The front lights up with something, the temporals light up with something. There's activity going on. In a coma brain, there's a lot of activity, but there's no dance. So the dynamics, which is lost in the QEG, is I looked at the EEGs that says coma, coma, coma. This person dancing. So that from there on they were fine. So for this one, this is where they woke up. The next one, it was on this one they woke up. The last one was really tough. Coma, coma, better. Coma, coma, better. So he actually recovered twice. It was like a trick question. And I got that one as well. So at that point, they got their 6.8 million because it looked like there was something to this EEG stuff that they could see. And, there are things that you can see, but not so much in the Q as in the EEG. But the Q does reflect some things. There's some coherence issues. There's some spectral presence or absence issues, things like that can end up predicting the likelihood of recovery. In certain kinds of coma, not the patients we had, but certain kinds of coma, the EEG is predictive of recovery if you look at it. If it's a spindle coma, they'll recover in all likelihood. The brain can make spindles that you're likely to end up recovering. But there's predictions that are dire or the grave prognosis. The next place you're going to be is in a grave. The burst suppression patterns, alpha or theta coma frontally, quite often it augurs for a grave prognosis. But just diffuse slowing doesn't necessarily predict one way or the other. If you do a P300, a cognitive P300 with auditory stimulation, it's a high pitch and a low pitch. One of them's frequent, one of them's odd. If the brain responds differentially to the two tones, it's a high predictor of recovery. If they don't, there's no prediction. You know, they could have been sleeping when you did that test. You know, but if you get a response to P300 out of an auditory oddball, it augurs for a good recovery. So the EEG really is underutilized in coma, and also underutilized in dementia and a few other things too. But
And you're talking about ERPs too.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, ERPs are EEG only with specific time markers, you know, and actually the EEG averages out in ERP. You do a stimulation at a given time, and at one time the EEG waveform might be up, and the other time it might be down. If you average a whole bunch of them together, the EEG averages out. Only the response to the stimulus ends up being repeated at the same exact point in time and the same exact spatial pattern. So the spatial temporal response to the ERP ends up being something that adds up with repetition, and the EEG averages out with repetition, except occasionally it is timed exactly right for the frequency that the stim is coming in at. And at that point, you may end up with an alpha that persists in the ERP waveform, or a fast frequency like a gamma frequency that persists in the waveform. It didn't average out, again, just because of the specific timing. If you change the interstimulus interval, you get rid of that effect. But if you do database, you can't change anything and still have a database comparison.
But what's going on in my
changing the luminosity or the range of radius of the image on the screen will change the ERP. So you've got to be very precise if you're going to do a database comparison.
But all these people that are saying, yeah, I saw myself laying in the bed, I was floating over it and all that. What's going on in the brain and the EEG with that? Is it just the chemicals going awry, or what? help this novice.
Well, let's speak from the been there, done that category here. You know, first of all, don't do this at home.
Duly noted.
Yeah. A near-death experience is not an uncommon circumstance to have an out-of-body accompany it.
Yes.
Right. I'm getting.
Yeah, I don't want you to have one now.
Please don't.
And
so, in fact, when they're looking at the patient on the gurney and they're working on the patient quite often sees them from above. I've experienced out of body. I haven't experienced the in the room out of body, but I've experienced the out of body.
What does that mean there, Jay? Sorry, in the room versus out of body.
Well, you can be disembodied, and that's different than being present in a room when people are working on your physical body, what we're observing them. I've had mine, quote, spontaneously. I didn't have to like go to the hospital and have them do something to me. My near-death experiences come quite commonly just because of my mess. No pituitary. If you look at the mortality morbidity statistics on pan-hypopituitarism, if you're a male, they give you a 50% chance of living a decade.
Wow.
And that's been 34 years for me, which is how I come so close to dying so freaking often. Their estimate of 10 years is a damn good estimate. You're lucky if you make it that far. And I'm a good guesser as to what I need to do to stay alive.
Yeah.
I've guessed wrong a few times and damn near killed myself. But if you're juggling 6 things and you're juggling them blind as to what they are, you lose track of which one is which. There's 6 things you're juggling. And if you drop one, you dropped one, but you can't stop juggling. You got to keep things going. You have to figure out which one you dropped, which one is off, and you'll guess properly which one is off. You'll be able to counteract that with a medication adjustment. But if you guess the wrong one, you can push it worse than it already is. and that will potentially push you over the edge. And I made a stupid mistake twice for the same reason. I didn't want to look too ill in public.
Yeah.
If I wait, it becomes obvious what's wrong. You'll eventually realize exactly what it is, but it's then obvious to everybody else that something's wrong too. And it's bad enough with people worrying about me in the first place without me actually giving them something to worry about, So, so I make a guess, and twice it's just been the wrong guess. And about 10 months after you take the medication you think is the right one, you realize, oh shit, I think I might have just done myself in. This is what I really needed to take, and here's a little extra. You gobble that down and kind of ride it out and hope. And that I was at BFE in Europe, and I was at a dinner party and at a table, and I was feeling pretty far off, and I made a guess, and it was the wrong guess. And I caught myself getting way off, and I took the right countermeasure, but I hadn't written it out yet, and they called me up to give me a damn award. So I literally, grabbing onto chairs, stumbled up to the front. They gave me this crystal plaque. You can't drop the damn thing. And wanted me to speak. And I said thanks. And stumbled back to my. And by then, people who saw me, some people just thought I was drunk. Other people realized, I was not well, and they zoomed over. And I got scooped up and taken outside and cooled off. And anyway, I just had to wait. And anyway, it was. It gets embarrassing dying in public. It's just
fair enough.
But on the other hand, it's all out there now. No, I'm playing, but
yeah, but. It doesn't stop people from worrying too much about it.
Understood.
I have a do not resuscitate order on myself. If I go down, you're not supposed to do anything. Don't call the doctor, for God's sakes. They might do something. And
were you experiencing?
I don't even let them do testing of any sort anymore. I don't let them do blood tests. I don't let them do any tests of any sort.
Wow.
If they test something, they'll find something. If they find something, they'll want to do something about it.
Yeah.
They test my blood work against norms. Well, test the blood work of somebody who's on a jacked up steroid dose and against norms. See what that does. So, I'm 77 this year, and I'm way past what they would have been able to do if they were managing me, and I'm managing me and not letting them manage me. So I've made it a little bit longer. But
we're happy you're a good guesser at what you need, Jay. But I think I wanted to ask Pete's question, maybe that he's thinking, were you viewing your body or the space around you? Do you recall?
I have been out of my body as a disembodied entity, perceiving without me attached.
That's incredible.
How far do you think
go?
What do you think that is?
The whole white light thing and all of that is part of the near-death experience, and it's not just a light. It's not just white.
Sure.
Wow.
Somebody who welds.
Okay.
The bright white that they have isn't just white. That's bright and white, but it's like just a little dot, and you can't look at it because it'll like burn your eye, and you got to have something over it. So imagine a soft white, warm, fuzzy, but blindingly bright, and all enveloping. It becomes all enveloping, and
incredible.
And it's not what about a warm fuzzy is fearful? I mean, it's a wonderful circumstance to end up experiencing. I recommend it highly when it's your time. So,
love it. That's good.
But don't. I mean, there's plenty of things to do between now and then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have the experience of going there and experiencing that, and you don't end up actually failing to come back, you won't fear going there. I don't care
Yeah.
if make it or not. It's not about that.
Yeah.
And anyway,
Well, Radar says you got 1 or 2 more decades, Jay, and you got to know if you had experiencing low cortisol.
I I eat hydrocortisone tablets. I don't make any cortisol at all. I eat
It's
it.
incredible.
I have to have it in the morning to turn off my immune system from killing me, and I have to take it in the afternoon because your normal cortisol has a diurnal
Is that
cycle.
no pituitary?
Yeah.
Yeah, no HPA. The
That's
P is
incredible.
gone, and it's all ha ha ha. Just just hypothalamus and adrenals, and there's nothing connecting them. So
Wow.
they're not. There isn't any stress response like you'd expect.
Well, I wanted to say this was actually, I haven't been privileged like Jay in that way, but I've read a lot about near-death experiences and watched a lot. And some of the things Jay is reporting, Jay probably knows, but for others, seeing the white light is common, but also the feeling of peace. Kevin Smith, the famous director, he had a near-death experience as well, heart attack, I think, and he describes the exact same thing, a feeling of everything would be okay. I know that, to get back into the neurology, and Jay can comment, I know that they're trying to chalk it up to, well, this is the T6 that De Ridder was stimulating. And when you stimulate that, the spatial parts of the brain are off, or it's the gamma. And then Jay pointed out that the people having that gamma, those were, I think, epileptics. And so I don't think that we really are anywhere near sufficiently knowing what is actually happening. And it could be extraordinary. I'm very hopeful that it is. So, but I'm happy that Jay's still with us, whatever the case.
I have to say that the literature recently had a report of a EG of somebody who died.
Yes, that's what I'm
and for God's sakes, find somebody who's freaking normal who's died, not somebody who has like a stroke and seizures and a bunch of other things, and now you got them hooked up and they happen to die. That's an abnormal brain dying. Look at the real thing sometime. It's entirely more interesting. If you've looked at enough people in coma, you may run into somebody who ends up essentially passing. We had a fellow hooked up, and we were doing EG and flat-9 determination to see if he was brain dead, and his heart stopped. Now, brain death is still controversial as to whether it's death or not. But when your heart stops, that's death. But flatline determinations are not easy. It's not a simple flatness. You have to turn up the sensitivity, and you can see, you can see the heart. You can see other things, but you're looking for brain rhythms, and they're absent. And
all right, last question, guys, and we'll turn off the pizza oven. So what happens when you get stressed? Do you experience a different sensation?
That's a good question.
I don't have, first of all, there's stress and then there's strain. Stress is the shit that's happening to you. Strain is the stuff you feel from it. So I still have stress, but I have no strain. So it takes a lot of the angst out of pretty much everything. And I was blessed with a frontal midline theta ahead of the whole panhypo pit thing. So I'm not prone to worry or fear in the first place. So Kathy Forte is an old friend of mine, and we were at a meeting in New York. At NYU sponsored a talk that I gave. The Brain Research Lab, Roy John's group sponsored a talk, and it's a 2-day talk. And we flew into New York. I got so sick flying. I couldn't keep my meds down. I was in such bad shape. I showed up for the first day's lecture, and I told them when they headed out at noon that bring me back some apple juice, and if I can keep my medicines down at that point, I'll finish the day. If I can't keep my medicine down, I'll probably have to go straight to the emergency room because I'll have to go IV. Everything is going to have to go IV because I can't keep it in me, and without it, that's it. So they brought me back some, and I kept my meds down, and we finished the talk and everything. But we're ready to fly home, and the airport in New York is crowded. And there's 2 seats, luggage all over the place, but there's 2 seats. And we went over, we looked around, and nobody apparently occupying them, and we sat down. So up comes a great big fellow with a lot of gold chains around his neck, with a really heavy Bronx sort of a attitudinal accent. And he basically uses my seats, get out. And I stood up, and we're essentially nose to nose. And he's a good sized guy. And I said, you weren't occupying the seats, and we took them. You shouldn't abandon your luggage in the airport. We're not going to abandon the seats. You abandon your luggage. And he started to suggest that he was going to throw down. And I said, I'm fine with that, but we're neither one of us going to be on our flight. If you want to miss your flight, let's go.
Jay, are you like Peaky Blinders? You got a razor blade in that?
If you have absolutely zero fear, the person sees that lack of fear.
Wow.
They don't know how the hell to read it because they're used to seeing it. Anyway, he took a step back, and we both made it on our flight. But
There you go.
The lack of an HPA axis gives you the no sweat. I got this. So anyway.
Jay Gunkelman, Joshua Moore, Anthony Ramos, another great Q&A. Radar, thanks for showing up once again. James Moore, thanks for showing up once again.
Yeah. Thanks to everyone. It was great.
See you next week, same time, same bat station. Jay, go make some more of that purple stuff.
Oh, I got three more jugs of it in the refrigerator. I just got the dribble on the bottom of this. Hey, it's actually it tastes, blueberries. I mean, how bad could that be? I don't know what the hell else is in it. Some other stuff, but I guess some flaxseed meal, and she whipped it up with something healthy for me, and she put it in the fridge for me to drink, and I'll drink it. So
shout out.
You have her to thank then when you live forever.
That's right.
She takes really good care of me, and it's probably the only reason I'm still here.
Wow.
And no stress.
We've been together 18 years now. So
That's
we
incredible.
got married a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
So.
And Jay, we'll be rooting for you with the surgery. I think it's imminent, but
Wednesday next week. We're not sure what time of day. 2 days ahead of time, they slot us in on arrival time.
Well, we expect to see you here.
no breaks.
No breaks.
Thursday morning for sure. No, I expect to know by the weekend whether the eye is going to work effectively for EEG. I mean, it's one thing to be able to see out and say, wave at somebody, but it's another thing to see detail accurately. And I can see inaccurately already with this eye. I don't need, that's why I patch it. I can't I can't fuse the inaccurate vision with a square vision. If I uncover this eye and I'm standing in front of a screen and I cover this eye, the screen's got a bunch of little dots that the lines don't go square, and EG should go up and down, not back and forth. So
Haida says good luck, Jay. Ida.
I have a couple of things. I have real good expectations. The surgeon's experienced, and he's got small, fast hands. So I think he's really good at what he's doing. And I'm also from a family that's as resilient as the day is long. So you can kick us and we don't even dent. I don't know how that happens, but the family is resilient. So
well, you're going to be just fine, Jay. Radar, last one. Where can I get an eye patch like that? I'll take it, Jay. Suisun City, October when, Jay?
October 8th to 11th, we're having a meeting, and the evening of the 8th, everybody's getting together as a reception prior to the 3 days of neuroscience meeting. It's planned to be Jay's Island. Gunkelman's Island, like Gilligan's Island. People will have flowery Hawaiian shirts, and you'll get lays when you come in the door.
Now I'm coming.
We're planning a fun party, and 3 days of neuroscience and hijinks. So.
And they auction off the eye patches, and I regret not getting one. So next year,
I do think that Mary was talking about having a small batch of them made, but there's so many of them out there. Goodness, there may be 100 eye patches out there at this point. So,
Jay, thanks for the overtime. See you in 15 hours, buddy. Joshua Moore, Anthony Ramos. Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening.